Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for today, February 18th, 2021. Well, the storm is continuing to create a crisis of incredible proportions in much of the U.S., especially the Midwest, and down through Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, where there are power outages threatening the lives of millions of people. Now, the media has a line on this. They're saying that the failure of windmills as part of a sustainable energy policy is only a minor part of the problem. Now, this is simply not true. The windmills are providing anywhere from 10 to 25% of the electricity in Texas. The average is 23%. And many of them have been shut down because they're frozen. They don't work. They're not reliable and they're not efficient. So the story coming from the media on that is a fraud. And don't be bamboozled by it. Don't accept this kind of lying. Now, secondly, they say, well, the system is not prepared for this. That's true, but not for the reasons you would think. The idea is not that this is a once-in-a-lifetime storm and you can't really spend the money to be prepared for it. The idea is the reason we're not prepared is because of the shift of the U.S. economy away from an expanding, scientific-oriented, technologically advanced economy, which prepares for these kinds of once-in-a-lifetime events. That is, has the redundancy of capabilities, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in hurricane and flood control, or whether it's in power generation. A functional system has to have redundancy. So why do we not have this? Now, this is the part of the story they don't want you to know, and that is the domination of neoliberal economics, of the whole system. Neoliberalism referring to, in this case, deregulation. Now, let me remind you of a few things. Excuse me. Do you remember Enron? A pipeline company that once became the seventh largest corporation in the United States before its spectacular collapse. Do you remember how Enron became that powerful? Do you remember Dick Cheney, the vice president who lied us into war, who operated on behalf of Halliburton, an energy company with military-industrial complex connections? Remember Dick Cheney and his defense of the Enron deregulation model during the California blackout crisis in 2001? Well, this is where you have to understand that the story from the media is a fraud designed to convince you that there's nothing wrong with the Green New Deal, there's nothing wrong with the economic policy, it's just a sequence of events which caught energy producers unprepared. Now, excuse me, this goes back to the 1992 Energy Policy Act, which introduced competition into energy markets. And over the course of the next decade, during the Clinton administration, and then especially once Bush and Cheney came in, this deregulation model hit virtually every sector of the economy. Famously, it was the 1999 repeal of Glass-Steagall, which occurred under Bill Clinton, and Clinton signed it. But it was a bill introduced by Graham, Leach, and Bliley, three leading Republican neoliberals, that deregulated the banking system, which led to the bubbles, the mortgage security bubble, and the collapse in 2008. A similar effect of this hit the energy sector after 1999 through 2001. Now, what was the idea of introducing competition? Well, they wanted to decouple production from delivery to create more opportunity for gaming the system, for speculation, for raising prices. They specifically pushed a policy which was outlined in a memo from Dick Cheney that he delivered to, or that was delivered from Enron rather to Dick Cheney in April 2001 at the height of the California energy crisis. The memo said there must be no regulation, no return to any regulation, no price caps, a total reliance on free markets. And the idea is that this will produce the greatest profits for the companies involved in this. And the way you create those profits is cheaper is better. And part of the cheaper is better is this concept of just-in-time delivery, that you don't need redundancy, you don't need planning in advance, you don't need to price in the future upgrades that are going to be needed down the road. Instead, you go for maximum profit in the moment. Now in Texas, well, actually I should just say in 2001, beginning in the end of 2000 and then 2001, you had a series of shortages in California that led to rolling blackouts. In May 2001, there were extensive blackouts. Electricity costs on the spot market hit record highs. Just as an example, the wholesale price of electricity went up almost 1,000% in California during that period, in April and May 2001. Enron's first quarter profits in 2001 had a 281% increase over the first quarter of 2000. 281%. Had they done anything to improve the delivery? No, in fact, they did things that worsened the delivery that led to the rolling blackouts. And yet their short-term income went up spectacularly. It didn't stop Enron from going bankruptcy because the whole thing was a Ponzi scheme. But that's what the deregulation meant for California. Isn't it interesting that California, a blue state, and Texas, a red state, have the same problem? California went with deregulation. Democrats used to oppose deregulation. Well, not in the modern economy, not since the days of Al Gore and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. The Democrats are as much on the payroll for Wall Street and the corporate cartels as the Republicans. Now in Texas, beginning in 2002, energy regulation was phased out. The slogan that was used is deregulation means energy choice, the free market. That's the best way to deliver products at a reasonable cost. Well, let's go back a little bit. It was in 1935 that the Public Utility Holding Company Act was introduced under Franklin Roosevelt. Why? Because there was a relationship between banks and the utility companies that were ensuring that whole sections of the country had no electricity. Remember, FDR also introduced rural electrification. But the monopolies that controlled the utility companies could gouge whatever price they could from people who needed electricity. The Public Utility Holding Act changed that. Now, the deregulation means that there's no incentive to prepare for potential crisis. There's no benefit to upgrading or building in redundancy. In fact, it reduces the short-term profit. And the whole model of the neoliberal system based on deregulation is to increase the profit in so-called shareholder value. That is, you increase the profit at the expense of the customers who are going to pay more for a market that's consolidated. Because one of the aspects of deregulation is it leads to larger monopoly. This was something that's been true in American history repeatedly, and all the restrictions against monopoly, as we see with big tech, have been taken off the books. And so you have bigger and bigger corporations with more and more power, more money to buy politicians, more money to promote deregulation. And what's the result? Well, look at the healthcare system. Look at the banking system. We need credit for production. You can't get it. We need to build new hospitals. We need redundancy to deal with pandemics, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Is that money going to be made available? No, because the credit is going into the pockets of the speculators. By design, this is the system. There's no incentive to invest in infrastructure if you don't make a short-term profit, if you have infrastructure controlled by private corporations. And the private corporate cartels usurp the power of nations to act for the general welfare. The idea of the general welfare is that you put the interests of the population ahead of the interests of private speculators. Now, there are times where corporations and industries need to make profits, and you can have protection for that in tax policy, in investment policy, and so on. But you don't want to have a situation where there's an increasing centralization or cartelization, I should say, using decentralized arguments that, such as, well, we'll give you more choice. Well, what's your choice if you have a blackout? Your choice is out the window. Now, there's an interesting comment from an energy fellow at the University of Houston who's been watching this, named Edward Hears. And he said the disinvestment in electricity production today in the United States is reminiscent of the last years of the Soviet Union. That is, that in order to maximize profit in the short term, you don't invest in the future. And the result is what they're now calling a strain on the system. But it's not a strain on the system produced by extreme weather, because you should be planning for extreme weather. No, it's a strain on the system by the looting of what's needed for the general welfare. That is, public utilities, a regulatory system that ensures that you're going to have a safe, reliable system and an efficient system. The Green New Deal will get rid of that, and is already getting rid of that. So the Davos model combines the Green New Deal and neoliberal economics. This is what the Great Reset is all about. You have the worst effects of total deregulation, where the benefit goes to the largest players in the corporate energy cartels, and meanwhile you build in inefficiency and unreliability in the so-called renewable systems. And as a result, people die. And what Helga Zepp-LaRouche said to me yesterday in a dialogue I had with her, which is available on the schillerinstitute.com, is that what we're seeing now is a foretaste of what to come if the Great Reset is not stopped. Mega profits for the cartel members and life-threatening conditions for the people of the world. Read our report, Get the Truth, A Great Leap Backwards. It's available through LaRouche Publications. I urge you to read it, and don't allow yourself to be bamboozled by this idea that you can buy utility stocks, you can buy into these systems and make some profit. Because you may in the short term show some profit on your portfolio, but it may be at the expense of the electricity you need to heat your home and to cool it in the summer. That's the Green New Deal and neoliberal economics. So thanks for joining me. Tomorrow is Friday. I'll be happy to take your questions. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com.